don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Gate Expectations Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Gate Expectations Podcast, where I bring in a weekly guest, talk all things Yu-Gi-Oh!, and get to know a little more about each person I talk to. It's the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast that is run by a full-fledged journalist such as myself. This is episode 40. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can check out an earlier podcast with guests like Crush Cards, Ruggles, Yassine, Pack, Distant Coder, and many more. My guest for this week is one of North America's renowned judges and has been a writer for TCG Player and for Konami event coverage. It's Joe Frankino. Joe, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, David.
Hey, absolutely. Great to have you on. And, you know, I've had a lot of guests, but I haven't actually had one yet that is really heavily on like the judging side of things outside Distant Coder, but he's more on Dueling Book. You're actually more like heavily involved with Konami. I know you've had judged events before and you've done some coverage. So like you're like a big time name, at least in the judging world, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Sure.
So why don't you just kind of walk me through on why you decided to get into like the judging aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh?
Okay, so we have to go all the way back to near about where I started playing, which was in 2006. I started playing around then, and then there was just a couple locals on Long Island, and I played, you know, at the various ones that were around me, which was all good. Eventually, like one local like sort of rose up above all the other ones, and because it was a store with a nice space. It's Brothers Grimm, which is in Selda and still there, and I still go there from time to time when when I'm picking up product. So about 2007, there were two judges there that ran the tournament, ran the weekly tournament, and our player base started getting like more towards the competitive end. Like we were like keeping up on the newest cards, keeping up on the latest trends. We were going to regional qualifiers, SJCs, Shonen Jump championships, and these judges were not. And you know, it's not their fault. They're like new fathers. They had other stuff going on. They just enjoyed Yu-Gi-Oh, and they were also at the card store at the same time. So our player base, which was like sort of like a group of friends, really, they're like these judges are okay, but like they're not gonna they keep getting calls wrong. They're not really attentive to the tournament. Like we need like actual judges. And I was the oldest of our group, and I seemed responsible enough to like, Joe, we'd like you to judge. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll judge. That's fine. Because I want there to be a place where we could all play, and if I could be a part of making that happen, then that's good. So I started helping in judging the local, and then eventually just turned into me judging the local, and the other two guys sort of just left the scene. We haven't seen them in a bit, and that's just part of life. Like interests just go away, and that happens. So me running a local for one day out of the week, and there was another judge that ran it on another day of the week. So I was running it on Tuesdays, somebody else running it on Saturdays, for about, I want to say like a year or two. So we're getting into like 2008, and I'm like, all right, like I passed my level 1 test. I think I could start going for the level 2 test. And then in late 2008, Upper Deck sort of just lost organized play for some reason.
I remember that big fold. Oh boy. There was a lot going on during that time, and I remember they were trying to. We had that event called Upper Deck Day, if you recall. Where they were starting to like pretty much give away like SJC prize cards away at those big events. It was almost like a glorified regional in a sense, I would say, or like a mini SJC, depending on like wherever your location was at the time. But they were just giving away product like crazy. I remember I topped 8 at one of them. I got like 2 boxes worth of like between like 2-3 different sets, which was like incredible. And they were pushing like Hunt Nick out because they were like, okay, if we're gonna lose Yu-Gi-Oh now, let's just throw out Hunt Nick, just try to throw it in new TCG out, which didn't work, by the way. heard that like a couple months after it happened and whatnot. But that was a really crazy time.
Yeah.
Throwing that out for anyone who didn't know about like the feud that Upper Deck had with Konami during the time about the counterfeit cards.
Yes. So the Upper Deck Day was actually my first real quote unquote event. So
wow.
Yeah, I mean, like besides a local, so like for the Upper Deck Day that ran at our local is actually run primarily by the premier tournament organizer for New York City, who's Alex Schwartzman, who's the owner of King's Games. So that's a pretty big name in New York City. Yeah, if you're in that area, you just know what King's Games is. That was my first real quote unquote event, and then once Konami took over organized play, I was like, okay, if all the judges are now on even footing, I can see like, I can like judge at a regional or whatever. But at the same time, I also kind of wanted to play at a regional because they had to run a year's worth of regionals in 3 months. So if you were playing at regionals, it was really super easy to get your invite compared to how it was before, where before it was top 4 invites passed down. Now it's just, then it turned into top 32 straight cut. Like, I was like, wow, it's really easy to get your invite. And then I didn't get my invite because I'm not good at this game.
I think you're the first person that's ever admitted that on my podcast, to be not good at the game.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll try all the time, right? But like the results are there, or rather the results aren't there. Like, I can't brag about what I don't do. Like, it's what it is. So Nats rolls around, and by the way, it was still called a national championship at the time. So I'm not like, I'm not being like, oh, he's using the word Nats when he's supposed to be using WCQ. It wasn't a WCQ at the time. It actually was a Nats. So friends and I took the trip to Pittsburgh, which is where the national championship was at the time. I tried to get into a last chance qualifier. I tried 3 different times and it didn't happen. And it's whatever. So this is where I first meet Julia Hedberg, who's the judge manager for Konami Digital Entertainment. So I'm going like through the vendor tables, and I see Alex from King's Games, and we're just talking whatever, and he asks, why aren't you judging? And I'm like, oh, I didn't apply. And he's like, oh, well, they need judges. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, just go to Julia and just introduce yourself and see if they need judges. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, mind you, I'm nervous as hell because I am an introvert. I do not do well with cold introductions. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to go talk to Julia because, again, like Julia was a big name at that point, even back then, because she wrote for Metagames. She worked for Upper Deck at the time, and then she eventually got picked up by Konami. So she's been a figure for Yu-Gi-Oh! Since, I want to say, since the beginning. So
yeah, I for God knows how long, at least as far as I played this game, and I think I started around 2004, and I think her name was pretty synonymous around then too. So she's been like a giant figurehead for this game, like since its inception.
Yeah. So eventually I go up to Julia. I'm like, hi, I spoke to Alex from King's Games, and he said you guys need judges, and she very politely said, oh no, we're fine with judges. So I'm like, all right, cool, thanks. And I thought nothing of it at the time, just like, all right, well, I asked, and that was it. So keep that in mind going forward. So played in public events for the rest of the weekend. Didn't go well, but it's fine because it's Nats. Like, you're there to see your friends, you're there to enjoy the weekend. So it was fine. And also the dual terminal was there, and that was like one of the very first events the dual terminal was at. So I picked myself up a play set of Harpy Lady Ones in dual terminal, and I still have them to this day, and that is super cool. So now we jump forward a bit. Over the next year, I start judging regionals, especially for Alex, and even for Brothers Grimm, because they also got to apply, and they also ran some regionals on Long Island. So like, our store gets name recognition because we're running regionals, and we're in Long Island, and Long Island has, like, the last time Long Island had a regional before that was like my first event as a player in 2006. So
big
like,
gap. Very big gap.
Yeah. So I'm like, cool, I'm judging regionals. Maybe I can judge an SJC. So the first SJC that I applied to was also the first SJC that I got accepted to, and the first one that I actually judged at, which was the 75th Shonen Jump Championship at Edison, New Jersey.
So you happen to get the largest one to date when it happened, because that was like a milestone event. I was at that one, and it was completely event was completely crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those who were not aware, everything that could have gone wrong at an event happened at that event. So I didn't get my judge shirt at that event because the pallet that had the judge shirts didn't arrive. There were a lot of tournament supplies that also didn't make it to the venue. And you had a lot of very inexperienced and green judges, myself included, on a judge staff that needed, like, that was trying to field a field of over 2,000 players, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
So, day one ended at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., somewhere around there. I don't remember. I forgot.
It was really long, and it went late into the night, because I remember staying there for majority of the day. I think I maybe left around like midnight, just because I was okay. I'm starving. I didn't have any food in me at that point in time, so I can only imagine how bad for the judges was, because I know that typically judges get like one round off for a break, and that was it. But that day in particular was just dragged on and on and on, and it was a fun event, nonetheless, but it was just long as hell, just because of the sheer numbers that were there. Yeah.
So the judges got maybe 6 hours or 5 hours of sleep, and we had to be in the venue at 8:30. So we had to be effectively there at really, like, so if I remember correctly, it was 8:45 doors open for players, which means we had to be there at probably 8. Like, we had to be like ready to go at 8:30, which means we probably had to be in the venue at 8 o'clock, if I'm remembering things correctly. So, do the math. You have to get up, shower, have breakfast, which means you're probably up at like 6:30 or 7. So how much sleep did you actually get? And also, it's an event weekend. How much sleep were you getting in the first place?
Like, exactly that. Yeah. I don't think anybody really gets like enough sleep for these kinds of events. Like, so much sleep is sacrificed for these events. I know.
Yeah.
Speaking on firsthand experience.
Yeah. So day 2 always goes better than day. Spoiler for anybody. Day 2 always goes better than day 1. If you're ever judging, like, it's just like, get through day 1, and then day 2 is the easy one. Always. So event drops, and it was an experience, and it was my first experience. And somehow I decided, let's keep doing this. So the next event I applied to was the 2010 WCQ, which was in Minneapolis. And that event went way better. Even though it was a WCQ, even though it was the most important tournament of the year, it went way better, because as it turns out, if you can survive Edison, you can survive anything.
Yeah, and not to mention that one was it kind of excluded the Canadian population, because that was the last one where before they combined both the Canadians and the Americans together into one WCQ. So a little bit less, because I know there's a ton of Canadians from at least my area and the surrounding area that went to Edison, New Jersey, because that's also a very reasonable drive, roughly about like 8 to 10 hours in between from like a majority of like the Canadian spots, whereas opposed to Minneapolis. Completely different as far as like where a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh's populated. So definitely a lot less for on your plate for sure for that tournament.
Yeah. So the next event that I applied to was YCS Philadelphia, which was in the fall of that year. So important to know, when I applied to that, I wasn't expecting anything. I was made an assistant floor lead for that event. Now, I want you to keep in mind, that was my 3rd event. Yeah. So obviously somebody saw something, or somebody was, or some buddies saw something. It's like, oh, maybe this guy like has potential or whatever. And on the 3rd event, they made me an assistant teammate. So I'm like, all right, that's cool. Let's just do the thing, and we'll be good with it. Yeah. Now, just to put it out there, I don't think that my judging experience is typical. Like, I don't think people become assistant team leads 3 events in. Like,
that's pretty huge.
Yeah. So, like, if you have it, you have it, but do not expect what I just said to be the norm for it, because I do not expect that at all.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of like walk through some of the roles that are at these high profile events, because I too have I've head judged regionals before, and I've also done like Shonen Jump Championships and YCS as well. So let's kind of walk through these. Like, let's start with like the floor lead. These are the judges that are out like taking the rulings for other people. They're handing out they collect deck lists. They'll hand out match slips. All like anything that requires actually going to the tables and interacting with the players in whatever fashion they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I actively judge, and I do want to say that when I actively judge, because the last event that I was on staff for was in 2018, and that was in Niagara Falls. So I don't know if they still do it this way, and I obviously don't know how they do it for remote duel events, but I can tell you how it was when I was doing it.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, so when I was judging primarily, judges were split up into teams that each had a different function. So the floor teams, which there were typically 2, sometimes 3, depending on how large your event was, were primarily responsible for being on the floor during a round. Each individual judge would be assigned a specific section of the floor. So like you'd have like tables, let's say 1 through 50 or 51 through 100 or whatever it broke down to. It's usually not that neat because usually the tables don't split like that. But just as an example, you get some amount of table space that is yours. So you have to stay in that area and you are responsible for that area. So you would answer judge calls from anybody in that area, or if another judge has to go and take do something else and is away from their zone for a bit, they'll let you know, and you should also look at their zone while they're away until they come back. So you would answer judge calls. You would put in appeals if any players appeal you, and then when everything is done, you want to make sure that the tables, like the chairs, are all nice and everything, that the tablecloth is all like neat and everything. Make sure it's presentable, because there are some people that like to see that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's also one of our responsibilities to like pick up any garbage that's there and like, throw it in the trash. And I've also had cases where if there's been like an influx of judge calls happening at someone else's zone and I wouldn't have any in my zone, I would like come over and at least like help out a little bit, like help some of that traffic in case there wasn't anything on mine. Also a couple other things that maybe we missed, but those are some things that at least I would have to do when on the events that I've judged.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. So that's primarily the floor. So you have another team, which is the deck team. The deck team you usually won't see on the floor unless they are actively doing a deck check or on their way back from one. So the deck team is primarily responsible for doing deck checks during the tournament and for maintaining the large collection of deck lists that are collected from the event. Deck checks are typically done at the start of the round, or sometimes in the middle of a round, between games, and all those are done in the back. So you usually will not see deck team judges on the floor unless they're coming back from one or going to one. And I don't know if they still exist in the same form, but another judge team is the paper team, which is primarily responsible for hanging up the paper pairings on the walls and distributing match result slips at the start of the round. And the reason why I say I don't know if it's in that same form, because I think at this point, paper team is effectively just 2 judges, and just the entire floor team is responsible for distribution of match result slips at this point. So I think it's just 2 people are on lead for it, and then they just divvy out the labor as they need to.
Yeah, that's how I typically had it in my experiences. That we'd have like a couple people responsible for cutting it up, and then it would be the floor judge's job to take the papers and put it out, because you're not judging the event yet because the round hasn't started yet. So at that point, it would just be the floor judges just putting out those the pairings out for it, and then the round starts, and then they can go to the floor afterwards, or they would come back and maybe help the paper team out in distributing the rest of the pairings, depending on the size of the tournament. Of course, that all takes into account everything, but that's at least for like the Toronto regionals, because that's like the area that I would be like primarily judging in. That's how like we would do it. It could be, it's slightly different, it slightly varies from like place to place, but that's just like the generic way of how most of the judges work out.
Yeah, and I think it just eventually just became that going forward, just because it's a better division of labor and it's a better efficiency of labor.
Yes.
So beyond that, now you also have now the admin judge team. The admin judge team is your head judge and your assistant head judges that are primarily responsible for making sure all the parts are working together properly, making sure the communication's there, and for handling any other sort of things that a floor judge would want to like escalate to. Head judges and now assistant head judges can now take appeals from players. So if a floor judge gets appealed, an assistant head judge or a head judge or the head judge can answer the appeal, and that ruling would be final. But the head judge is still responsible for disqualification investigations. Only the head judge can do that. So that's sort of why assistant head judges can take ruling appeals now, because you want to make sure your head judge is available for the things that only the head judge can do.
Yeah, and that was something that wasn't always done before. This is something that's kind of been in place for like the past several years, where the assistant head judge can now start taking appeals, because like appeals strangely take more time than what it's anticipated, because sometimes it's like a conversation that happens between the head judge and whatnot, and that kind of eats up a little time, and that's what you got to get the attention of the head judge itself too. So going back and forth, it surprisingly eats up a lot of time. So it's nice that you get a second head in there to really help out with that process, because appeals can take an exorbitant amount of time. I think I had one in Chicago for the WCQ when Dragon Rulers was about, and it was I think it was round 7 of it, and one of the judges they were doing a deck check on us, and my opponent just played his first card, and then he got to go first, and then the judge said, "Yeah, okay, we're doing a deck check on you." And the other guy was a little bit upset, because he just realized, well, now I know what he knows what I'm playing now, and like he's getting upset when he was playing Spellbooks, I was playing Dragon Rulers. So, and he tried to appeal it, and I'm thinking, like, why would you appeal it? Like, what is this going to accomplish for you? Like, what is it going to change? And I think that was the sole reason why there was supposed to be 9 rounds for that Chicago tournament, and in effect it got taken down to 8, because that appeal alone just ate up, I think, about a good 40 minutes for some reason. I don't know why, but like a level on that, like we went to 8 rounds in Chicago instead of 9, and I don't know what that accomplished, but I mean, I still won anyway. So it's just stuff like that, but stuff like that can really eat up time when you appeal. So you got to be like, you really have to do the appealing very, very seriously. You can't just like throw it around like anything, even though you have every right to, but it's something you just can't take lightly when doing.
Yeah, like appeals and delays in tournaments is like one of the big things that that really slows it down, and deck checks unfortunately will just always require an extension, just because of the nature of deck checks. And that'll get into something a little bit later, but I'm just going to keep it in my mind, like, all right, we're gonna talk about delays and stuff. So tournament like judge staff is admin team and those teams there, and as the event goes on, and I'm sorry, I forgot about the mentor judge. So the mentor judge happened like in the middle of all this. Like, it wasn't when I started, but it got implemented later. The mentor judge, or the mentor judges, depending on how big your staff is, They don't do any actual judging. They don't answer rulings questions. They don't do deck checks. They don't do any of that. The only thing that a mentor judge does is evaluate the judges on staff. They offer advice. They give feedback. And that's all. Like, it's all it is. It's just helping the judges become better judges. That is their main responsibility. And if you are at an event, you will notice maybe a judge that you recognize is not wearing a judge shirt, is wearing just plain clothes. That's how, and they're not playing in the event. That's how you can primarily tell who the mentor judge is, because they are not wearing a judge uniform. Because you don't want players thinking that they're on staff when they're not. So, well, I mean, they are on staff, but they're not. That's not their role in that event. So, so they're wearing plain clothes and they're just, watching the judges. So, a very important role, by the way, because it is important for judges to get that feedback to become better. It does not happen naturally, and you want to give judges the best opportunity available to become better judges if that's their intent.
I believe it's also called another term for it is also called like a shadow judge.
I've heard that before, but I know it as a mentor.
Yeah, it's not really thrown around as much, but that was like one of those like alternative names that it's been given. I've also had the case where the assistant lead would also actually be like the one who would typically have like the higher seniority or anything like that, but that was also like a mentorship role as well, because they would be the ones to like ask the questions to like whoever the lead of the team was. It's like, okay, what should we do now? Should we do this? They would kind of ask them a lot of questions to see what kind of decisions that they would get and kind of go from there. So like I've had cases where like I've been an assistant lead helping out someone who's like in the lead position for the new time, and then I've also been in that position where I've been like a lead where the assistant was like who's had more experience than I am, like kind of mentoring me in a sense. So like there's a lot of different ways that we've seen like the mentorship part of the judging like go out there in these tournaments.
Yeah, that is something that is sometimes done, and I very much agree with it. You don't get the experience unless you actually do it. So having the seniority always be the lead sort of works against that, because if there's no turnover, how is that experience being passed down? How is that learning happening? So there will be times where if you're deciding which judges go where, if you want somebody to get the experience, you'll flip assistant and the lead, and you'll have the more experienced person be the assistant lead, and you'll have the less experienced person be the floor lead, and the floor lead will direct things where to go, and the assistant lead will have the knowledge and the experience in case the floor lead asks for it.
And that's what I like about the assistant lead being kind of like the more experienced judge, because it's a way for them to kind of like provoke the head judge, like the lead a little bit, like when they ask them questions like, okay, well, what are we going to do in this situation? What's going to happen? Like, what is your plan to like run the event? They ask them all these questions and they get them thinking, because like these are like the situations that you're going to have to come across, especially if you start head judging maybe like a smaller tournament that doesn't have as many judges. Like, these are the questions you just have to ask without somebody kind of being there, kind of, I don't want to say babysitting you or anything like that, but being there as like that mentor like position for you. Like, you got to be able to do it even on your own, because I've head judged a tournament before where it's just been a scorekeeper, myself, and I've had one other judge, and this is for like a 150 200 person event. It's happened before for me, so like I had to rely on nobody except basically myself kind of to kind of run an event. So these situations can happen, especially for like the smaller cities and whatnot.
And I've been to tournaments like that before too, and it's not pleasant, but you do the best you can with it, and hopefully the players understand too.
And one thing I've always kind of felt bad for some of the judges is that like it's kind of like referees in sports and whatnot. Sometimes it can kind of be like a bit of a thankless job, and like all these guys they're volunteers as well. Like they don't have to be here, and then without these guys, you're not going to get any events at all for whatnot. But of course, like when like one bad ruling happens and whatnot, of course that's going to be like the stigma that's going to be attached to them for like the rest of the day, as opposed to like the 98 100 million things that they did good and so it did well, that kind of is superseded by like the one thing that's happened. And I've given a bad ruling before, and I've been like chastised for it. And there's even one person that even chastised me for like 10, like, oh god, like 15 years ago when I first judged. They still chastise me to this day, and it happens. But
it's just like I totally get like bad calls happen, because it happens in any activity or sport where things are subjective and things are like that. Like it like Yu-Gi-Oh is not unlike that. Like, and it sucks when it happens. Like, and I've been there too. But the thing is, if you're doing the best you can, if you learn from it and you make sure you take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again, then it's a win. Then that's the thing you want, is make sure you learn from the thing and make sure you recognize how it happened in the first place so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it is. It's all a learning process, because like even like professionals in like the most professional sports, like the NFL referees, they make mistakes too, like MLB. But umpires call balls that are strikes and strikes that are balls all the time. It happens. Like it doesn't matter how like professionally trained you are, mistakes are bound to happen.
Yes,
and that's something that maybe some of the players may not realize.
Yeah, especially in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I hate to say it, and I really hate to say it, but our rule book and the resources that judges have for actually making rulings is not as great as you'd want it to be. And if a judge gets it wrong, you have to look at what was available to them at the time. And if you realize like there's nothing to back this up officially, then I don't blame judges for getting it wrong. Like, if there's nothing out there, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's like a court case that has no precedence, because like you have nothing to fall back on. It's like, so you kind of have to make a decision right then and there on the spot, and not to mention like all the pressure that's like being on this decision, because if you make a decision like maybe like X amount of people like, well, that's not right, but X amount of people say like, well, that okay, I can kind of agree with that, but there's no like hard concrete proof on it. We can only go by like maybes and like, well, there's possibilities, but again, when you have to make that decision like on the spot, like it's really tough to kind of satisfy everybody with that kind of decision.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about the thing that was in my mind when I was talking about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had judged one WCQ, and that was the 2015 WCQ, which took place in Nashville, Tennessee. And this one is high profile because it was on stream. People saw me mess up, and so it would be kind of weird if I didn't talk about this. So this was a playoff match. It was either like top 64 or top 32, or it was in the late rounds on day 2. It was sometime at that point. So this there was a ruling question that happened at the feature match table that was being streamed, and it involves Shadal Core and Farfa Malabranch of the Burning Abyss. So Farfa's effect banishes Shadal Core that's being treated as a monster, and then the Shadal Core gets banished. Yeah, and the ruling question was very straightforward. It's what happens to the Shadal Core in the end phase. Like, does it come back? Does it go to the graveyard? Well, what happens to it? Yeah. So the floor judge, well, rather the feature match judges, they make a ruling and it gets appealed. So that's fine. So it comes to me, and I have one of my assistant head judges there with me. So I'm like, all right, well, it's the stream, so I have to take this because it's, you want the head judge taking this, for optics and all. So, so I'm going through it, and I'm like, I don't see anything that we can really use. Like, so spoiler, I had access to like a large collection of old rulings, but this specific example, I couldn't really think of anything on the spot. And if you're in the middle of a tournament, you can't be sitting there browsing through every ruling like an encyclopedia. You have to, like, if you don't think you're going to find the information you need, you got to make a call. Like you gotta just do it. So I'm like, all right, I can't find anything. So let me read cards. Let me see, like, all right, so I forgot exactly what decision I made, but I'm like, okay, I think it's this. Let's go for it. Mm-hmm. And my phone blew up after I got done with that call.
Oh, no.
So, which means I invariably got it wrong. So, I mean, wrong in quotes, because I then looked at what people were saying, and I'm like, oh, okay. All of the rulings for trap monsters are under the entry for embodiment of Apophis.
Yes, which was the original, like the OG trap monster, like way back when.
Now, keep in mind, earlier, I said that I started playing in 2006. When did embodiment of Apophis come out in the TCG? And the answer was before that, which means I was not actively looking at rulings as they were coming out. I would have missed that. And also, it was 2015. It was at least 10 years since that card came out.
And that's a card that was absolutely never played at all. I don't recall it ever being played in any competitive deck that ever like topped an event or whatnot.
Right. So on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I messed up a ruling. But on the other hand, I was like, how was I supposed to know this? Like, was I supposed to just hold on to all possible card interactions in my head all at the same time, just in case one of them comes up at some point? Like, it's like, that's a big ask. Like,
it really is, because there's the event where there was the controversial judge ruling of being able to activate Inzector Hopper on the very first turn for an Inzector.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and of course, like they ruled the event that you could, but then eventually it was kind of ruled later on that you couldn't do it. And I knew, I remember when I heard that ruling, like I instantly did think of a card that had like the same precedence. It's called Overpowering Eye. It's a spell card that lets a zombie with, I believe, 2,000 attack or lower be able to attack directly his turn. And I knew that there was a ruling that said you can't activate this on the first turn. But again, this is such an obscure card that I'm sure that 95% of the population has no idea what that card is, maybe never even heard of it, but it's like one of those cards where, oh, you're like, there's precedent here, but how am I supposed to know of this card, which nobody plays, nobody knows, nobody does anything, and like really hard to like use as a precedence and whatnot. And it was kind of like that situation for you in a sense.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that, where it's like one decision was made years ago. You don't know if it's still valid or not. You just like the information isn't there. So if judges get it wrong, I don't blame them. Like, like you do the best with the information you have, and that's the best you can ask for.
Yeah, and especially since there's also like a time constraint on it. Like you have to think of this like pretty much almost on the spot, or you might get like maybe a minute or two, but you can't like be taking like an hour or 2 hours to really come up with a decision, come back, because you've got a tournament to run. Like it has to keep going with regardless of how difficult or how problematic the ruling is. Like you can't do it, so you gotta make a decision right then and there. Which again, like it's a lot of pressure having to make that kind of decision, but it's someone has to do it. And and of course with the circumstances presented, you're bound to be wrong at some point in time, and that happens.
Yes And that's one of your concerns, is that you get the information you can, but also keep in mind the longer you take, the longer extension you have to give, and that's going to push the round further and further. And while the players may not mind it, the tournament organizer, who has to pay for the event hall, will absolutely mind it. And now that we're in the current year, this was not a thing when I was judging, but now since judges get an actual paycheck because they are considered temp employees, it also has a additional fiscal impact. How long your tournament goes. So, and I suspect that's also why end of match procedures are.
That's what I thought too when the end of match procedure was given, because it's like you're saving time, so that's less money you have to pay for the judges, that's less money you have to like book for the event hall and like whatever like broadcasting like company that you maybe have hired to like help stream all this. Because I remember there was one WCQ we had where they couldn't film the finals because the event took way too long, and doing that would have been like way past the contract. I think it was in Pittsburgh, I'm not 100% sure, but either way, like that was the reason why. So like there's certain time limits that the whole event, that the event has, like Konami has, to be able to like pay all this and that. And it's amazing how much an extra hour can completely cost like Konami, the company in itself.
Yeah, that was actually 2016. I was on staff for that particular WCQ, and I was actually a feature match judge. So I was sitting at all of the, at the streamed feature matches for that event. And there was a hard out for the stream production crew, and if they did the finals, they would not be able to tear down quick enough to get out in time. So that would have been a huge hit, and like it sucks, but like that's also like, I think that event is also why the WCQ start times went back an hour also, because usually it was cut off at 10, and now it's cut off at 9 for a 10 a.m. start. So it's like, this is real life. Like all of this comes back to like just real life restrictions, I guess is that word I'm looking for. Just things that have to happen in order to have a large scale TCG tournament. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and like it's very easy to just not realize that if one thing goes wrong, a lot of things get messed up down the line. And and that's
like one of the the first things that like cause a delay in tournaments, and I don't know if a lot of players realize this, is like the registration. And what I mean by the registration is that we get a lot of late stragglers who come to these events, who come at like the last 5 minutes, and it still takes a little bit of time to get them registered, because we have to ID them, we have to look them up, they have to get to the line themselves, and we have to make sure we get them registered before we are able to send them off, and then we collect their deck list and everything. So that also adds extra time, and that even happens to me on a local level as well, where I'm ready to start, and then someone comes in and like at the last minute before I'm about to start, it's like, oh, sorry, can I get in the tournament? Like, yep, okay. I'm like, I have to like stop the pairings, put them in, make sure they paid for the event as well before they get in. So you have to realize that the late stragglers also delay the tournament, and that happens a lot at regional levels. And that's why like you can make the joke all you want that regionals and YCS may never start on time, but that's a unfortunate benefactor of like late players that come in, or discrepancies that happen before the tournament, because that happens a ton. And some people might ask like, hey, can I have my deck list back real quick because I want to make some changes on it? Like that can happen. Like there's a lot of outside factors that like come into play with these that a lot of players like actually don't realize that occur, which is why it's really hard to like get the event started on time, and especially when you're doing this with like a very large scale of players, especially at like a YCS and WCQ where you're dealing with like 1,000+ players.
Like having the good habits of registering well before that deadline is going, like, it would make the tournament a lot quicker and a lot smoother if more people did that. And I assume that is also why Konami incentivizes players to register on Friday for a WCQ or for a YCS with the dice. Like if you register early, you get this dice, and having the day before registration makes the day of registration a lot smoother.
Yes, makes it a lot simpler. And I can't remember or not. I want to say no, because I believe the Friday is a completely like a volunteer is completely on a volunteer basis when it comes to like paying the judges, if I recall. I'm not 100% sure because it's been a while. Maybe you can like correct me on that one if I'm wrong.
I'm not 100%, but I would assume that is working hours for the judges. So,
Okay.
so like you are getting paid on the clock for whatever it is you're doing. So you report at a certain time and then you clock out at a certain time.
Yeah. Okay. Because I remember before when judges like weren't paid, at least when I was like head judging, sorry, not head judging, when I was judging more high profile events, we had Friday as the like it's a completely volunteer basis event. Like help out if you can, if you want. Like you're not gonna get compensated for it, but it would be really grateful and really helpful if you did kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that went by the wayside once the paid model came into play.
Yeah, which I can understand because at that time judges were considered to be volunteers, but they were volunteers that got compensation. So you could be a little bit a lot more flexible with the quote unquote hours that you worked and whatnot, and then they can Konami can just kind of pay you whatever they feel like. They choose to pay you extra, choose what they're not. Because like I got paid a little bit extra in like packs and whatnot if I decided to work the Friday, which I was grateful for. I loved doing, and I always worked every single Friday that I could when I was working those events, but it's a little bit trickier now that everything has to be monetized as far as working judges are concerned.
Yeah, it's a lot of the not a lot, but it's a part of the reason why I don't really judge so much. It's because like what are we getting, like minimum wage for judging? Like my time's a little bit more valuable than that. I would rather be doing something else. And granted, for like a big event, you probably like I think they still get like the mats and things, but if you're judging just for the swag and you're not doing it for like the reasons that you get into it in the first place, like making sure that you have an event that runs properly, making sure the players have a good event, like if you're not getting that sort of satisfaction out of it, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So I've told judges that throughout my entire tenure as a judge, like if you're not doing it for the right reasons and if you're not enjoying it, get out. Like if you're driving yourself crazy because like you are trying to keep up with rulings and your feet hurt when you're walking the floor and you're taking too many weekends, and it's just like if it's getting overwhelming, just cut it loose. This is extra. This is it's nice, but it's at the end it's extra. And if you're not enjoying it, just let it go. And that's eventually the decision I came to. And after 10 years, like that's a good run to me. Like that's
very good run, very long run.
Yeah. I met some great people doing this, and I don't regret that at all. And I'm just like, I'm glad like I'm not I still keep in touch with judges and some players as well, and it's just like, and even with event coverage writing, like it's effectively the same thing. Like I started it in like 2017 or whatever, went until 2020, and I again like it's sort of the same thing. Like I enjoy watching matches, I enjoy writing about and talking about the game. Like I still play the game, so like I still get enjoyment out of it, and I wanted to like help other people get enjoyment out of it too. And unfortunately, like the same thing happened where it's like, oh, this stopped being worth it, and like I wasn't getting the same enjoyment out of it as I was before. So you cut loose, and here we are. I played in one public event this weekend in the extravaganza. And that was fun. Like I enjoyed that. Like I'll enjoy the remote duels as they're happening, and when real life organized play comes back, I'll still enjoy it too. But at the moment, judging and writing just that fall by the wayside because that's work, and I stopped getting the same enjoyment out of it. And you gotta just do what you like.
Well, I wanted to touch more on that same point again about kind of judging for the wrong reasons. I want to add to that because you don't want to, because first of all, when you're working for Konami, like whether it's just for a day, like you're being an ambassador, a representative of them. And if you're just kind of there, just not to really like for the love of the game or whatnot, or you're just kind of doing it for the paycheck, I feel like the effort's not really going to be there for it. And but you're connected with Konami. So if you just have like one bad experience with another person that's there, in the player's mind, they're gonna think, okay, well, this person's working for Konami. They're like acting as an ambassador. They're a rep of them. And then like if you carry that like negative like attitude into it, that stigma is gonna be passed over to the player, and then that's the impression that they're going to get from like of Konami, because that's the kind of people, quote unquote, that they're having on their staff, and that puts them in a really bad light, which is obviously the last thing that Konami is going to want in that situation.
Yeah. Now, granted, like there are judges, like especially newer judges, who may not like grasp that particular thing of it, but it's still good to have newer judges in there, even if they're not, completely altruistic. Like, there is value to having somebody who has not judged before judge, like even if they're doing it just for the mats or whatever. Because, and this is my opinion, it is good to have players know what it's like on the other side of it.
Yes,
I think it gives them an insight towards the process, and it will be like, oh, when I'm mouthing off the judges, this is what it's like to have to sit here and just bite my lip and be like, don't talk back because you're not supposed to. Like I really think, like, if you're like a competitive player, even if you don't apply to a YCS to judge, just go to your regional and just judge once. Like just see what it's like, and you'll get a better appreciation for it. And you might figure out something, like you might, as you're talking to players, you'll realize, oh, if this player said this instead, I would understand the situation a lot better. And then you can take that with you, and you can better communicate to your judges when you're next playing in an event.
Yeah, really, and I can completely understand that, because when you put yourself in that other kind of side of shoes, you have that ability to be able to communicate with them better. It's like, okay, if they talk to me like this, maybe I'd be a little bit more responsive, and maybe I might get like, not like something in my favor would say, but maybe a little bit more leniency or a little more understanding. Because of course, like if a really bad player, if like a player with a bad attitude is coming at you a little bit more, you probably want to throw like harsher like penalties, or like, lay down the law a little bit more, as opposed to a player who's like a little more respectful, a little bit more calm and cool, and that wants to have like a more like an actual like real like question, and maybe like tiny debate with you, as opposed to someone who just wants to be like purely confrontational, or like just make a spectacle on the matter.
Right. Like, and it's also like just a good experience just to know, customer relations. It's effectively customer relations. Like if you're not in the sort of retail world, if you're not doing client facing things, then this is like dive headfirst into it, and this is a taste of what it's like.
Absolutely. That it's just, and again, this all going back to being in their shoes for a bit, just even understanding just the slightest bit of what they have to go through, and then you understand, okay, I'm not going to do this to cause any kind of trouble. Like, for example, when I'm at a regionals, I'm a player, I'd be like everyone, we got to get our deck list together. Let's get them so we can pass them all down to like the judge. We'd have it all ready for the judge when the judge would rise at the table when we're ready to go. So it's a lot easier for them, and like had them all organized and everything like that. It's just like these little things, and like when I get up out of my chair, I'm gonna push it in and take any garbage that comes with me. It's just like these little things that kind of happen, because I know on the other side of things, judge has to kind of be a little bit of a janitor as well, and like housekeeping, cleaning, straightening up the tablecloths, as you said before in the podcast. Like, these are like the little things, and like now that I have this experience behind me, and like I still judge from time to time, mind you, I haven't left the program or anything like that, but it's just knowing these things. It's like, okay, I can help do a little bit of my share to kind of make the job easier for everybody, because you kind of want judges to have a good judging experience as well, so that way they can keep coming back, and if they keep coming back, we can have more events, and that's what I want. I want more events. I want to go to a regional like every month. That would be awesome. I would love to do it. So what do you do? Like, you have to give good experiences for the judges as well. It's not just the player experience, it's the judge experience that they need as well. And a lot of people seem to forget about that it's not just the players, it's also the staff that works behind it too, because without the staff, there's no game. Without the players, there's no game. You need both together.
Yep. And judge turnover is absolutely a huge deal. Like, you have to be good players in order to keep good judges. Like, that's really what it is. And I've seen good judges leave the entire community behind because of the community. Well, if you're in the community, it behooves you to be a good community, to have better people around you. Like, that's really what it is.
It really is, because I've also, like, when I've head judged a couple regionals myself, I've had some players like really give like a bad experience to one of my judges, and they came back to me in tears, just like telling me how like poorly mistreated that they were, and like so I had to go like rectify the situation and whatnot. But like some of these judges, like, they really take like a lot of crap from these players, and it's completely unfair. Like this the past couple of years we've made the word like Karen as like this new term, where this like the entitled kind of thing, but we kind of get that sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh players too, where they just want to be jerks. They just kind of want whatever and just kind of dispose, like toss the judges aside like they're nothing. But like, no, they're people too. Like, you gotta show them a level of respect as well. So it kind of goes both ways here. Like, there are Karens in Yu-Gi-Oh too, which we may not talk about a whole lot, but they're there. And you gotta really give that respect line between like judges and players. And like, if we can get like a good clean tournament, and maybe we can all get out of it right at a good time, so we can go maybe have a meal with our friends afterwards when it's not like 12 a.m. in the morning where I have to sacrifice sleep and go play the next day.
That is absolutely correct.
I mean, like appeals and whatnot, those are normal. Those are like kind of like expected delays or not, but we don't want the delays where somebody's just causing a ruckus, yelling at like a tournament organizer or a head judge like that, because it's happened before. I've seen it happen, and it's like, come on, guys! Like, you don't realize the kind of like the repercussions that you're doing by like yelling at an official or like causing the scene with not like unnecessarily. So just to like make it like to I don't know, like assert your dominance. I don't know what it is with this. But like, by the way, it causes a lot of problems.
Players yelling like if it gets to that point, like that usually falls under unsporting conduct, severe usually. So like, you fill out the paperwork, and by the way, for everyone listening, judges for the most part hate disqualifying people. We do not like it one bit. Like, it is just an awful experience on both ends. It is never pleasant to have to tell a player that they are disqualified and that they have to leave the tournament and leave the venue, because now taking it a little bit inside, there's a form we have to fill out, a multi-page form that we have to fill out. The players are responsible for filling out part of one page, and a player statement takes up an entire other page. Having to sit a player down and hand them the player statement sheet and be like, you're being disqualified. Here's the thing you can fill out that tells your side of the story, be as complete as possible. And then I have to get their information as well. It's just like, it's never pleasant. Nobody likes doing it. But at the same time, we do it because we have to. Like if you commit something that requires the penalty, unsporting conduct severe or unsporting conduct cheating, it is on us to issue the proper penalty and follow that through. Because otherwise tournament policy, tournament rules, they don't matter. If we just say, we'll let it go. If you let it go, then you might as well not even be there.
The baseball did not even be any rules at all. And then not to mention, like, it also kind of makes the situation awkward, like during that entire process where you're having to tell them, I'm sorry, you're DQ'd. Can you fill out this form? There's that little tension in between. And then once you like get them escorted out of the building and whatnot, you like, even though it may or may not be a problem, you kind of have to think, okay, I got to watch out for this person now. Are they going to like try to make a return or whatnot to the event because they're not supposed to? Like, I've had cases where like we've had players that have tried to like re-enter the building when they're not supposed to, or players that have been suspended but try to get into the building anyway when they know they're not supposed to. And that's just that's just extra hassle. Like, and it probably won't happen, but but the fact that it's in your mind, like that's what you're going to be thinking about for like most of the day, and it just kind of takes over your judging experience, and it just gets like it gets terrible in that case.
Yeah. There's like, so usually that will be the responsibility of the tournament organizer. Usually that does not come down to judge staff, but there have been times, like, even though it's responsibility of the tournament organizer, as a judge, it's still in the back of your mind. Like, it's still like, if this person, especially if they're a security threat, like if they're a security threat or like to themselves or other people, it's going to be in the back of your mind. Like, if this person comes back, how are we reacting to this? Like, it's just like, you don't want to be there, but at the same time, like, this is what you signed up for, and it sucks that it happened on this particular tournament, but just get to round 8. Just get to round 8. just make sure all the players get their invite paperwork filled out, give them their mats, give them their deck boxes, and then just get out.
And I remember, like, the past like several years now, we've had to start getting the local police involved, just there as kind of like extra security and whatnot. And I remember one Philadelphia event, like there was actually a fight that happened on the Fridays of the pre-register. So for the rest of the people that came in, because I remember I came in like about maybe half an hour after the fight had happened, and like, all right, you're just going in and you get a pre-register, and then you're going out. No one's allowed to stay here. You can't be there. Like, and that just completely ruins the experience for everybody, because when I go to these pre-reg events, it's casual for me to go see like buddies I don't see for a long time and say, hey, what's going on? Let's have a conversation. Hey, you want to trade with me for a little bit? Let's talk. Let's catch up. Let's socialize. Let's have some fun, because you kind of want to socialize maybe a little bit outside of like who you travel with, just for a little bit, because you're seeing people you haven't seen for years or months. It's like, hey, let's do this, have someone talk, catch up, and then leave, and then go back with your group and whatnot. But then when you have that kind of experience, just ruin it. It's like, well, great. That's less time I get to spend with people that were supposed to come in that day. Because like tournament day is like, if you're doing really well, you don't really have a lot of time to like kind of socialize. You got to get ready for the next round and prep and whatnot. So it's a completely different experience when just one person or two people just decide to kind of like ruin up and mess up the entire day.
Yeah. Do you think like the next, like the first YCS that's in person after all this goes down, you think like 40 or 50 people are going to cry when the judge says you have 40 minutes, you may begin?
I feel like whenever those words are uttered again, there's going to be like a giant celebration, like maybe a giant cheer, like maybe a giant applause or something like that, because that's kind of been like the words that have been all over social media. It's like, we can't wait to hear these words. Like, you have 40 minutes, you may begin. Like, we're all waiting for that day, because I'm a huge extrovert and I love playing like in real life dueling. So I personally can't wait for that.
There's going to be a huge standing ovation. There's going to be it's going to be a grand occasion. Like, it's going to be, I always make the joke that the WCQ is the family reunion of Yu-Gi-Oh, because even if you don't qualify for it, even if you're not even like half the time, even if you're not going to play, like you just go there just to see the people that you want, like that you haven't seen in a long time. And I feel like this first YCS that's going to happen, like after organized play comes back, it's going to be that. Like, it's 100% going to be that.
I am willing to gamble on that 100%. And everyone's been wanting like to have their in real life duels back. And this is not a knock against remote duels, even though I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm glad that they open this opportunity for us to, at least keep the game going. Like, when we get back to in real life dueling, I'm sure there's going to be like a giant yell of like jubilation among the crowd, because we get that. Like, we've had cases where we've had a lot of like the whole room cheer and whatnot, but I'm definitely sure that we're going to get that kind of reaction come the first event we're going to get back. I'm confident that we're going to get over COVID-19 eventually. It will happen. You just got to be patient with it and take the right steps for it. But if and when it finally does, I'm in full agreement with you that is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy about remote duels also. Like, I'm happy it's there. And I'm impressed with how organized play was able to adapt to the conditions and allow us to keep playing a physical card game without putting us in danger. Like, that was like, and like it happened relatively quickly too, like maybe like a month or two. Like I am just like super impressed by that. And granted, in terms of like large scale tournaments, like the remote duel the extravaganza main events, like which in my mind were like sort of the testing grounds for how well you can run a regional level event over Discord. Like granted, speed bumps at the beginning because any new process, it's going to be, there's going to be speed bumps like 100% of the time, but they were able to adapt so quickly to it and streamline the process. Like, I think that's like super good. Like we're able to play in large scale events from our homes. Like that's great.
Do you think that, let's say theoretically, if and when the world opens up again, we're back to in real life dueling, that Konami would still maintain the option of being able to have like remote duel events?
So that's tricky to me because if they do that, they're sort of taking away from their own business at that point. Yeah, like they're splitting apart TCG like in two different areas, remote duel and in real life. I think that they'll keep remote duel for things like Duel Links and for Legacy of the Duelist and Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution, because that makes sense. Like, yeah, you can play Legacy of the Duelist from home, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can just do that. And same thing with Duel Links. Like, sure, you can play Duel Links from home, and you can even actually play Duel Links at a public event, because that's what we did before. Like, people went on their phones and they played Duel Links against each other, and they got paired off in a single elimination bracket. Like, that's just that's also possible. But remote dueling for physical TCG, I think that goes away once in real life or when organized play comes back.
Yeah, because I've heard the argument for continuing it, and I think you're the first one who's actually give me an argument against it, which I completely see and understand. The argument I saw for maybe continuing it is for people with accessibility issues that maybe can't get to some of these events.
Sure.
Some people who maybe have some like maybe mental health issues where like a lot of people can't like handle crowds very well or can't be like away for long periods of time, anything like that. I mean, maybe you could maybe make an event where like only that's tournament eligible for only those kind of people, whatnot. But that's a completely different ball of wax that you could touch. But that was an argument for those kinds of things. But now that you presented your side, like I can totally see like on both sides of the argument where like, should we keep remote duels or should we leave them? And that's that might be a decision Konami might have to make once the world's able to open up and we're starting to do like in real life dueling again. So who knows on that front? I mean, that's a nice perspective that you provided on the other side of it, because I never heard of that side of that corner of the argument yet.
Yeah, I would imagine Konami would look at this from a lot of different angles before they made that kind of choice. But from my mind, it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, that's fair. And not to mention, as you mentioned, there are several other ways of being able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That we already do in an online format anyhow. So let's jump on those while keeping the other game, which is our main attraction, kind of like the centerpiece. Let's not take away from like what the game was primarily meant to be for.
Right.
In a sense. So yeah, I completely see your argument in that sense, and I completely get it. I'm on the fence if we should keep remote duels in or out or not. Now that you've presented me with this, so completely up in the air. So that's definitely something that interesting to see what Konami is going to do moving forward with that, because we've seen events before have like specific tables for people with disabilities or any health issues where like they can have their own table, or if they need to like run off for a second, like they have that table. So who knows at that point, but I like the argument that you presented with that.
Right.
Yeah. And then you told me you participated in the extravaganza over the weekend. How was that experience?
Good. I played in one Winamat. I ran Live Twin Eldritch. It's a deck, I play around with a lot of different decks just because I like to sort of experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Like, I'm not the type of player that immediately goes to net deck a list. Like, I used to be all very like very stringent on it. I'd be like, no, every list has to be mine. And then I realized, wait, I'm not good enough to make my own lists. I am not going to be Jeff Jones as much as I would like to be Jeff Jones. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I'm like, all right, what I'll do now is I'll like make up like I want to do this strategy, and then I'll make a first draft of it, and then I'll see what other people did with it and see what other options like I like, just to compare like what did I do versus what did they end up with.
Yeah.
So I really like the live twin strategy just because it's like it's a normal summon and it puts up like this incredible like draw and control engine on the opponent's turn, and that's super cool. And granted, it's a normal summon that's not Alistair, because I think in 2021, I think we're all tired of normal summoning Alistair. But and Eldritch is just a strong strategy. It's just completely resilient. It's like here's this big zombie that just keeps coming back. Like there's just a really good synergy with it. So I played in one Winamat. My first round opponent had to leave almost immediately, so that was a free win. And then, oddly enough, Distant Coder was in my Winamat, and he was my round 2. And I did not win against Distant Coder. He was playing Salamangreat, and every time I tried to disrupt his normal summon with something like Sanguine Conch, he had the Book of Moon for the Eldritch the Golden Lord, so the Conch didn't pop, and then he just went off anyway. And that happened in 2 games in a row, and I did not win. But you know what? I'm going to get the promo that is going to be included with this, and I got to participate at least once, and I want to participate today, but unfortunately I am terrible at starting my day, so that just didn't happen. But I have the deck, and I'll probably play in a couple more, locals throughout the next couple weeks or so, and we'll see what happens for. Is there another extravaganza coming up? I don't even know.
I don't recall anything happening too soon.
Yeah, but you know what? It's fine. Like I'll play remote dual locals. It's fun. I get to, do it on my own time. I don't have to, drive out the 15 minutes or whatever to go to my local, which they're not even running events, but like once they kick up again, like just going into my office is just super easy, and I can like have dinner and just if I need to just get up and go whatever, I'll have to like wait for a bathroom or anything, because there's a bathroom right here, and it's great.
Now, you also have been able to have an experience where very few people do, and you've got to do event coverage as well. Writing for Konami, doing feature matches. I've done it too for Metagame way back in the day when Jason Gravemeyer had a little bit more creative control back then, and he would let me help him out here and there. And how kind of describe that experience of being able to cover matches for the Yu-Gi-Oh blog.
Yeah, so it is definitely an experience. Doing feature matches, especially in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, is very much an experience in learning when to do your paragraphs, because before I would do my paragraphs for every turn, but when your turn lasts 10 minutes, that's a huge wall of text, and not many people are willing to read that. Yeah. So doing feature matches is nice because you get to see the fresh things, like especially on day 1 when we're selecting new stuff. We're selecting decks that are fresh. We're selecting things that people haven't seen before, because that's sort of what, like, it's not a specific direction that we get, but it is something that we as writers want to put out there, that we want to show people that there's more to this game than just what tops, that there's so many combinations of cards and things, and we want to showcase what people are bringing to these events, and we want to show you, hey, here's some cool new strategies that are not going to break your bank. Like, this is what you can do with this deck. And then day 2, we just do the meta nonsense, which, fair, because that's all that's left. But like on day 1, showing people new stuff, showing people things that they haven't seen before, like that's really what is like the thing that gets, like, that brought me to the table.
Yeah, because this is the kind of the pattern that I've seen and the kind of what I had when I was helping Jason. I was like, in the first few rounds, it's always been like, let's feature like the really fun, cool stuff that hasn't been done before ever. Maybe around like the mid rounds, let's see if those decks, any kind of deck like that, is still like alive with a very good record in the tournament. We'll kind of keep going with that, and then near the end, we'll still do that, but to a lighter note. And if nothing happens, we'll see something if there's like a compelling matchup between two players where we know that there's been like history with them, like any kind of like fun like rivalry, like beef, or like a rematch or something, any kind of like telling storyline to have it as. Like that's kind of the focus of where we've had like feature matches and whatnot. And you know, it's sometimes it's kind of, you have to kind of dive deep through it, and Jason does a great job of being able to dig deep and find some of these matches that you like that just become a diamond in the rough out of nowhere. But
yeah, that is definitely a skill, especially because it's not just about just like you could just type words on a keyboard. Like, anybody could do that. But being able to find the story is part of what makes a good journalist, and that translates here as well. Like, being able to get the story is more important than just he played Goki Suprex. Like, congratulations, you played Goki Suprex. Like, all right. But being able to find, like, for like YCS first timers, I'll tell this story because this is like one of the best things that I wrote for the blog, and it's not a feature match. This is YCS Pittsburgh. I think it was like it's 2017 because this was zoo format. So in this event was also the same event that I think Chase Furman won his YCS. And it was also the same event where I had an actual 10-minute turn one Zodiac combo. And
God.
Yeah. And because I was timing, I'm just like, oh, this player just finished their turn one and we're 10 minutes into the match. So I put that in the feature match just because it's factual. You got to put it in. But the YCS first timers article for that event, I was able to find an actual 5-year-old at a Yu-Gi-Oh event. And I'm like, that's perfect because that is exactly who Konami is gearing this product towards. This is the target demo right here. This is absolute, like, so favorite card, Blue Eyes White Dragon. Perfect. Excellent. Get that down. Just like, you got to be out there. You just find the story. Like, I'm not a journalist, but like I was on my high school newspapers staff. Like, I took the journalism class, so like I pretended to be a reporter for a couple of years, but really like what it came down to, it, like, I was not writing at like my grades, like I was mostly STEM. Like, I was like, here's AP science, here's AP math, and then my English was just regular English. Like, I was not a writer. Like, I just didn't know like what the teacher wanted me to write. But I took journalism because I wanted to report things. And what ended up happening was, hey, Joe, you take really good pictures. Let's have you just be the photographer. So I'm like, all right, cool. I guess we're doing that. And it wasn't until way later that Jason approached me about writing a column for TCG Player about judging. And as it turns out, I was good enough to do it for 4 years. And again, that was surprising to me, but like not unwelcome. Like, that was just like, I was able to talk about judging for a long time, and I was able to pass my experience on, and hopefully judges got something good out of that. And just like this article for the YCS first timers, I hope somebody got something good out of the things that I wrote for the coverage blog. And like, that's like what I hope people get out of that.
Well, speaking as someone who is a journalist, you know, we have something where we say, you know, you don't always have to be like reactive. Sometimes it's good to be proactive, where instead of just like waiting for the news to happen, why don't you go out there and let's go let's go like find some news that's going to happen. Let's not let the news come to us. Let's go to the news itself. Like sometimes when I look up, like when I make pitches to like whoever my boss would be, I'd be like, okay, I found this. So like, well, why don't we do a story on this? We call this a story pitch, by the way.
Right.
And we tell them, let's go find this. Like, well, there's this development happening right now. Why don't we we'll cover this story? Why don't we cover that? And that's what it is. It's like and like right now in my current career, when I talk to the owner, we have a meeting and we go, okay, what have you found that we can do for news for this week? Like, have you found anything up? And then I'm going to run through a list of things like, okay, well, this is happening on this day. This is happening on this day. It's not a matter of just waiting for anything to happen. Let's go let's go create some news. Or if there's like something that's coming up, for example, like let's say, for example, like you guys do it too. Let's say like a new Yu-Gi-Oh set's coming out.
Yeah.
Like, let's go and ask people. It's like, what do you think of this new set? What do you think of this new set?
Yeah.
What cards are you anticipating from this set? Which Konami has done before? So it's stuff like that. That's like a bit of journalism where, like as you mentioned, where like you got to be proactive and you got to go out and find stories. That goes back to Jason being able to find wonderful decks. That's you going to find that 5-year-old who's played Yu-Gi-Oh, and like you can make a story out of that. Like if you decide to be really into like a journalistic side of it, like that's a story.
Yeah,
there's a 5-year-old playing Yu-Gi-Oh. This game is kind of that pack says like ages 8 and up. So when you see a 5-year-old playing, that's an oddity. That's something that's something inordinate. Let's go make a story on this kid. Just as an example of being proactive. Yeah,
and event coverage has to be good event coverage has to be very much a lot of that, because in a big event, there's not going to be just one type of player. There's not going to be just one type of deck. Like you have to bring out what is actually like, bring out those hidden gems, bring out somebody like, let me just jump ahead. So we were in YCS Pittsburgh 2019. It was, there was a YCS New Jersey. I don't remember if it was 2019. It was probably before, so we're jumping back and forth, but that's fine.
Yeah.
At this event, there was one of my local players that was in day one, and he was doing very well with Element Sabers. Now, granted, that's never been on anybody's radar, at least not in TCG, and we saw it. I'm just like, wow. Element Sabers, yeah, let's get that. And then like we featured it, and it's just like, yeah, that's super good. Like I'm glad we were here for that, because you want people to know like, hey, look, here's a thing, and you can do what you want with it, but here's a player that was able to do well with a strategy that he made up. He didn't net it. Like he just like, here are the cards, let's put them together. Here you go.
And we've even seen like those kinds of deck lists that even if they don't like make the top cut or whatnot, like people are still like very interested in it because it's an oddity. It's something different. Maybe people want to, maybe when they say that, maybe, okay, I'm going to try my own spin on it. Maybe I can improve upon it because this is like the beta version, quote unquote, when we see it, and maybe we can improve on it. Like, and again, like people want to see those kinds of things, because we have to remember that even though that YCSs, WCQs or whatnot, they're expected to be like competitions to see who's the best. Not everyone at these events is there to be like, to win. Some people just go there for fun. Some people want to play casually, but like in a competitive setting, or some people just want to say, I want to take this deck out and just see how well it does in these kinds of events. So you have to remember that you're not just catering to like the top players. And this is also a thing for journalism too. You're not just catering to the people who already know. You have to assume that there are people who don't know this, like don't know the obvious, that don't know like this information that you would think is universal. Like we always say, report to the farm, report as if you're talking to the farmer out of butt heck nowhere who's been living under a rock, and report like that. Like, like if you're on coverage, everybody might know what Orchestra Harp Horror does. But you gotta tell, what does that card do for the people who don't know what that card is? You have to like reiterate that information again and again, because like there are people who don't know. Everyone of all skill levels are there, so you gotta cater to everyone that's there.
Yeah, that's something like I always try to keep in mind when I do my writing, is that it has like the audience is not going to be completely competitive. Like I cannot use slang terms like, oh, he's like, there's too many like this is a hard once per turn. Like unless you already know what that means, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that. And when I'm doing my writing, I have to make sure that the accessibility is there, so that if you're reading it and you just happen to like, if you're like a casual Yu-Gi-Oh player, you can understand what it is I'm saying without having the previous knowledge of what Yu-Gi-Oh, like what it is I'm talking about. Like it has to be something that you can come away with and you're not scared off by it, and you have to be like, okay, I now know something, and that's good.
And that's what it is, like, because these are also a way of like teaching tools to these players as well, because you know like let's say, like, for example, right now the current meta is like Dragon Link. That's like one of the best decks right now. I actually haven't gone against a Dragon Link deck. I don't know what that deck is supposedly supposed to end on. I don't know what the optimum board is. So when I'm watching a feature match, when I'm watching somebody commentate, I'm like, okay, like I don't know what's going on. You've got to walk me through here. Why is this move the best move? Why is this the optimum move? What does this do and whatnot? Because like, even though I play this game for so many years, there's always going to be something for me to learn. It's like, and Dragon Link for one thing, it's like, I don't know what this does. Like, walk me through this. Don't like, let's not assume here.
So like commentary, like especially during like feature matches of like YCSs and stuff, it's always like I try to like just do it at home, just by myself, just mute it or whatever. It is tougher than you think, because if the players move quick, like you can't sit and explain like the stuff like that. Like if there's a break in the action, absolutely. But if the players are moving, you got to move with them. Like there's no stopping that. Like if there was an opportunity to like talk about plays and stuff, like especially like between games or even between matches, then sure, absolutely. But like especially like during like high level events, like let's say the World Championships or whatever, it's tougher to make the product approachable like that, just because of how quick things move. Like if the match is if the match is like 5 moves in, like if the players are 5 moves ahead of you, you can't talk about why he did this instead of that. Like, or if you do, you have to just say, he went a different line of play, and then just keep going.
Exactly that. And that's how it is with sports broadcasting too, which is what I also do as well on top of my journalism, that you do have to move within the flow of the game. But there are some times where you get like breaks in between where you get to talk, like for example, hockey. It's a fast-paced sport, but you get whistles, and then that's the time where you really start to analyze it. But if there's like slow play that's going on in like in hockey or even in Yu-Gi-Oh, where like a player's thinking, then you've got time to explain it, but you also have to be able to time it right, where you can like keep going on about the play when it actually develops again. So it is very tricky, because I've been on that side of the ball too. Like I've commentated for Yu-Gi-Oh events, and I've also commentated for a ton of sports events, because that's what I do professionally as well. So it can be tricky. But one thing I will say to a lot of commentators out there is that like you've got, again, like it might sound repetitious if you have to say the same move again and again, but if you're doing like separate duels and different broadcasts, people are tuning into these duels. You still have to say the move over and over again and explain it whenever you can. You got to reiterate that information, because maybe some person saw round 4, but maybe they didn't see round 5. So you got to explain it to that kind of thing and appeal to that. And that's something I always kind of tell all these like these amateur or like these first time like broadcasters when they do it. It's like, doesn't matter how many times you've had to say it. When you welcome in a new audience or anything like that, you've got to explain it once again. It happens in journalism all the time. I've said, I don't know how many times I've said the words pandemic and COVID-19. I have to explain it. I have to explain all of this stuff until it becomes widely universal. I have to explain everything. I have to. That's part of it.
Yeah. And Twitch is almost like the same thing now. Now, granted, I don't have a huge audience of my own. Like it's just just like effectively my friends and some random stragglers. But as I'm playing whatever game it is I'm playing, like I'll talk about things I've talked about before, or even things like the previous week or whatever. But you have to assume that your audience is always new, and like that's just how it be.
It is, and not to mention when you're trying to like grow like your channel or grow your product and whatnot, you want like these new people to kind of stay tuned to it.
Yep.
And when you explain all these things, like, oh, okay, like they'll walk me through and they'll help me out. So when I come back to it, like I know that if anything new comes out, they'll explain it again, even if it's been out for a while, they'll still explain it. And that's what you want. You kind of want like all this as a teaching tool, because when you're out there broadcasting, you're telling a story. You're kind of telling them what's going on, what's happening. You got to explain it. You're trying to be informative and tell a story at the same time, which is why like you kind of have to be a little bit repetitious. Yeah, it sucks for the people who already know, but you also have to worry about the people who don't know. And I can't like pound that into to everybody who like doesn't know that, like enough into everybody's heads. Like you got to explain this to everybody. Yeah, everybody's watching. Yeah, it's not just the competitive players.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to Yu-Gi-Oh, if you say something misses the timing and you don't know what missing the timing is, you didn't actually explain anything.
Yeah, yep. And again, going to philosophy, we call that kind of like a tautology. You're saying it, or it's a circled argument. You're just saying A equals A. Okay, well, why does A equal A? Well,
right,
because it's A. Like, that doesn't help me.
No, yeah, clearly. Come on, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly that. Oh, it's nice that I can flex like both my degrees here on my own podcast. It's kind of fun because that's what I studied. I studied journalism and philosophy. It's nice that I can flex a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into it. Joe, man, I'm fantastic having you on. Really got to explore like a lot of different topics that I haven't been able to explore on the podcast, because you're really like a unique individual when it comes to your involvement with the game, because of the high profile judging that you've done, and also being like an event coverage person as well, which is a fun gig, by the way. But it's kind of funny where, you know, as you mentioned, you do 10-minute turns, where I did it way back when, where turns would probably take about maybe 2 minutes, and you can just have to type in maybe about 2-3 lines of what the move was, as opposed to now. So, it's a little crazy. But thank you so much for coming on my podcast. Any shout outs you want to give?
I didn't think about this. I wish I had prepared. Yeah, I can't think of anything at the moment, unfortunately.
All right, no worries. But where can we find you streaming out your whatever Duel Links and video games, whatever? Where can we find you?
So on Twitch, I am Crazed Gamer, which is CRAZDGAMER, and you could also find me on Twitter at the same handle.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, and we have had some conversations before on Twitter, and then I've also enjoyed, you know, the kind of funny little mods that you do with the video games, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast. Because as we mentioned, we're very close when it comes to the age, so we both have like similar interests in terms of like the timelines of video games that we like. So touches my heart. All right. That is Joe Frankino, renowned judge, feature writer, and great guy all around. Joe, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I hope to see you soon again whenever things open up, because, you know, you're always one of those people that I always have to say hi and bye to, at least whenever I see you in an event.
Oh, of course, David, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have yourself a wonderful day.
You too.
I think we're roughly around the same age. I'm 30. I'm 33.
Ooh, I am 30. I'm 38. I look young for my. I've always looked young for my age. It's a game that I play with people where it's like, how old do you think I am? And they're always shooting younger, and I'm just like, that's right. Yeah.